Josh, so you got us thinking about this originally because you pointed out that Kentucky was a game that Tennessee needs to be worried about because the way it fell on the schedule. So that got my brain tumbling, which is a scary thing. And I thought, well, hey, Josh Ward, let's rank Tennessee's opponents based off the beatability scale and how concerned they should be. So that's what we did. So talk about going into this project, which is on offthehooksports.com, and you can read it now. We're going to break it down. What you used as criteria to rank what schools where.
Yeah, different collections of criteria. Austin Peay ranked last. It only made the list because Tennessee agreed to play the game. So Austin Peay leads things off. Tennessee will win the game and will win by a lot of points. That's all that needs to be mentioned for the Governors, with all due respect. UConn is similar. Jim Moore did a nice job. I think was better than a lot of people expected last season, getting to a bowl game. But if Tennessee had played UConn in a bowl game, the Vols would have crushed the Huskies and will do so at Neyland Stadium. Then things kind of get interesting. So in non-conference, you have Virginia, you have UTSA. I actually ranked both of them ahead of Vanderbilt. Perhaps that's too hard on the Commodores, but last year Vandy had a good opportunity going in, having won a couple of games in a row, and then Tennessee, despite a deflating loss and having to change quarterbacks, absolutely steamrolled Vandy. So why won't that happen this year? This is not to say UTSA is a game that should scare Tennessee. It should not, but it's sandwiched in between two SEC games, SEC East games that will matter, and they can score points at a group of 5 level. So I rank them ahead. But Kentucky, if you want me to go through, or Dave, you can stop me whenever, I do have Kentucky ahead of other opponents that might seem like they should be higher, but because of where it falls. The game is in Lexington the week after Tennessee plays in Tuscaloosa, and it's difficult for anybody the week after you play Alabama. Back-to-back road games against a Kentucky team that will be very motivated to beat Tennessee. That game means so much to the Wildcats. This is not to say that Tennessee will lose, but that's a dangerous spot. So I have Kentucky ahead of South Carolina and Florida. And South Carolina actually have probably ranked lower than where some others will have, considering last year's result. But that game is circled for Tennessee. I have no concern about the Vols being ready for South Carolina when that team comes to town.
Couple of schools I want to discuss, and I know Caleb wants to discuss Texas A&M because he believes there's a chance that the Aggies will just disband their football program this year, not even show up at Neyland Stadium. So that would be a win by forfeit. But South Carolina, you have it 6. Did you factor in the revenge factor? Because of all the games that could maybe sort of be coin tosses, which I guess that would be considered after what they did to Tennessee last year. I just think the motivation factor is going to be huge. Not that you're not motivated to play other games, but man, last year was a gut punch.
Yeah, I factored revenge for Tennessee, the motivation in for sure. And that's why I don't have it as high on the dangerous list. It's 6th. Like Tennessee hasn't reached a level to where you just check that game off. So South Carolina being ranked behind Florida, A&M, and Kentucky on the dangerous list doesn't mean it's an automatic win. I just look at that as one where Tennessee will play UTSA as much as I respect what that team is. That's a lighter opponent compared to SEC teams that Tennessee will face in terms of preparation for the next week. It'll be in Knoxville. There will be no reason for Tennessee to overlook South Carolina. Quite the opposite, considering last year's result. And I still see South Carolina as a program trying to catch up to where Tennessee is. So it's a game that Tennessee could lose. But if Tennessee is focused, which I don't think was the case for everybody last year, then Tennessee should be the better team and should beat South Carolina.
Josh's appearance brought to you in part by City Heating and Air Conditioning. 50 years of integrity, 50 years of service in Knoxville. Your HVAC unit may not need to be replaced, just may need a part or some coolant, so you know you'll get the right call with City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. Click the thumbs up button. If you haven't subscribed yet, you're crazy because the Celebrate 98 series continues with Sean Ellis. Hit it, Caleb.
Josh, it's funny, when you were naming the schedules in order, you said Florida, and then you said A&M, and then you said, I think, South Carolina, but you said Florida A&M, and I think Florida A&M would be tougher for Tennessee than Texas A&M this year. The question I have for you with how Texas A&M can be ahead of Florida.
At some point, did Jimbo Fisher like try to pick up your mom or something? Caleb hates Jimbo Fisher like nobody else.
I don't hate Jimbo Fisher, but no, he didn't. And it's more likely Jimbo Fisher's ex-wife tries to pick up me. So
All righty, there he goes. That's high hot heat right there, Josh.
In case y'all, I'm sure y'all all know the story on that one. But Josh, Texas. My issue with you having Texas A&M ahead of Florida is that Tennessee still has to visit Florida, where they haven't won since 2003, and they've only beaten Florida twice in the last 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they get Texas A&M at home and Texas A&M off a bye. So forget like where the teams are going to be, and I think Texas A&M is going to be awful and collapse this year. Don't those things make Texas A&M an easier game? I mean, Josh Heupel off a bye, isn't he almost unbeatable?
Yeah, so that one I probably struggled with more than any other. The difference ended up being Texas A&M's players. Their roster is significantly better than Florida's. Texas A&M has a roster that should make almost every program in the country jealous. The problem is that it's been mismanaged and the offense has been embarrassing with the level of talent that it has and the results that we've seen the last couple of years. So you could end up being right. Like if it falls apart and Texas A&M disappoints again and they force Jimbo Fisher out despite his high buyout, I won't be surprised. And from a scheduling standpoint, I did note in the column, Tennessee has the advantage having the week off while A&M has to play against Alabama. It simply came down to players. But I agree with you in everything that you're saying about Florida. Going to Gainesville is not easy. And odds makers are making Tennessee a touchdown favorite right now at Florida, which is actually a huge number considering Tennessee's results there. But it's also the first game in SEC play. And what if Tennessee has a difficult time early in the game offensively and it's tied and you start to wonder? So if you say Florida should be ahead of Texas A&M, I have no strong argument against it. It simply came down to players. If we're wrong on the side of, okay, it's going to fall apart. Let's say Bobby Petrino does come in and work wonders with Connor Wegman, who is talented. Like Florida would love to have him at quarterback. And then all of a sudden they have this 5-star running back that's come in and they have future NFL players at wide receiver. And we still have questions about Tennessee's defensive backfield. All of a sudden things could get interesting in that game. And their defense has all kinds of talent. So it was simply a roster bet on Texas A&M that they get things figured out. But it could turn out that this is a disappointing season for A&M. And if it doesn't work out this year, they can't have Jimbo Fisher continue to coach because they have too much talent to waste it.
Yeah, but man, the buyout's like still like 75 million plus, isn't it? Man, they're in a hairy mess. I kind of think
drill some oil and pay it. But that's if that's if it doesn't work out. Just a few years ago, they were the team that everybody said that's the snub to not be in the playoff. So it hasn't been that long, but they almost beat Alabama last year, despite having a terrible season. They were a play away from beating Alabama, and 2 years ago they were 8-4 and beat Alabama. So if they're capable of doing that, they are capable of winning in Knoxville.
You know what you get right before you get to oil, right? There's a pocket of, you know what? And it's very valuable. You might know this. Think John Ward, Josh's grandfather.
6
natural gas.
Oh, there you go.
See, they could turn that into some cash as well. It could be Walter Nolan Sack, brought to you by natural gas.
Or they could just take some Saudi blood money for some more oil. Sorry.
Golly, Caleb, just on it today. All right, so Alabama, Georgia. It is at Alabama. It's a revenge game for Alabama, but I tend to agree with you. Georgia is still number one. But was that difficult in your mind?
Not really. And that's a statement about Georgia. The fact that playing in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, Nick Saban, is not the number one most dangerous game. But I don't know if you've caught much of Georgia football the last 2 years. It's not an easy go. And Tennessee was good enough to beat Alabama. I know it was in Neyland, but Tennessee was good enough to beat Alabama, and that was with Bryce Young playing spectacular football. He was special that night in Neyland, and Tennessee won the game. Well, Bryce Young plays for the Carolina Panthers now. So with the concerns that Alabama has by Alabama standards, that to me creates less concern than what you face from Georgia, which also has to replace its quarterback. But Georgia's going to replace its quarterback with a very talented player who's been a part of the system, and they do have a new OC. And both games are going to be really difficult, and Tennessee will be an underdog in those two games. Right now, though, those are the only two games, Alabama and Georgia, that Tennessee would be projected as an underdog. Just it has to show that it can be topped before it's not going to be number one on anybody's list. And if I put this list together for anybody that had Georgia on the schedule, Georgia would be the number one most dangerous game because they have NFL players all over the place.
Let's play an over-under real quick. How many times could I bench press Bryce Young's weight, which is roughly 195? So, Caleb, you set the over-under.
3.
Okay, let's put it 3.5. Josh, you taking the over-under?
You're a lifter. I would say over.
I think it'd be over.